for ATA for this opportunity for me to share here in this place and prestigious place and meeting with all of you here. The topic that I'm talking about this morning is theological education and the millennials. When I was given this topic, I faced two main challenges. The first is that I'm going to talk with experts in the field who are theological educational experts. Many of you are seminaries, presidents, principals. You come from a background of Christian education and training, which I'm not. I'm trained as a biblical scholar. So I suppose many seminaries, presidents, and principals did not have that kind of training before they were appointed to be a president, right? They were lecturers, and then they were appointed to be president, and many of them long to return back to just teaching instead of fundraising and doing a lot of admin role. Anyway, so I feel a bit challenged, like what can I say to this bunch of audience who are experts and you know much more than I do. Perhaps some of you may be thinking, maybe we want someone young to speak. And that's one reason why Teresa said, since you are one of the youngest president in this region, it's good for you to speak. That will be my second challenge. You see, I always find myself a bit of misfit. Even though biologically, I keep telling people I'm biologically a millennial. All right, I'm 34 this year. But I don't fit well with my fellow millennials. I call myself a zennial, if you know that term, zennial, which means among the millennials is a wide range of age group, right? Then there's this oldest group of millennials, that's where I belong to. And this micro age group is a bit of misfit. They find the baby boomers will find us very young. Say, you're a young chap, right? So you belong to the millennials. But our fellow real millennials will find us old, right? Because you see, the way I dress was also very old. You see the last few presenters, very hipsters and kind of thing. The way they talk, like, whoo. I'm trained in the UK, so I read from my script. So, very typical, yeah. So I'm very challenged, and I don't think like many of my millennials. So I have that challenge. What can I bring to the field that can be useful for you when you go back to your schools and your seminaries? So what I thought is that maybe I can do a little bit of survey. Right? So I asked ATA staff to help me with that. We sent out a survey to all the schools in ATA and to find out what are the challenges that you face, right, in your school when dealing with millennials, millennial students, faculty members, or whatsoever, the millennials in your institutions, and then I can share it in this podium, and so that all of us can have a slight glimpse of what Asians are facing, right? So I begin with that hypothesis that maybe Asians, millennials are different from the West, because we have a different context, right? We may not have all the technologies like in the West, and like what we have said so far, Asians are not homogeneous. We are so different, so diverse. So I asked a lot of questions in relation to that. And hopefully then we can present something for us very locally helpful for our context here. And so that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to just present the findings of this survey. And at the end of the session, I'm just going to share a bit about what I have done in my college, BCM, Bible College of Malaysia. And since I'm one of the youngest president in my college as well, like what Samuel says, all of staff here in my college are older than me. So it's never easy to bring change when everyone else, some of them was there when I was a student there as well. So it's not easy to change your lecturer. Okay. So that is what I will do. But this is something very millennials will do. We'll get you to participate more. And so the presentation will be rather short, okay? But we'll spend more time in the conversation part. Is that all right? Is it okay? Yeah. You don't feel cheated, right? You pay so much for this conference and you didn't get much. Because this is the topic that many people are looking for, like, oh, theological education, this is what we do. What Victor's going to bring to us. And keep telling them, lower down your expectations, okay? Okay, let's start with the survey. So the survey is really to identify the challenges faced by Asian schools. And in these surveys, I define the millennials according to the Pew Research. That is referring to those born between 1981 to 1996. So biologically, you're supposed to be age 23 to 38. Anyone belongs to this age, this part of this survey is all about. So I have received altogether 53 responses from 50 theological institutions from 19 countries. Not too bad, I was told, but I was really expecting more because we have, how many colleges do we have? 300. Oh, 300, we only have 53 responses. And I suppose many of you are too busy to respond. I think I get that. Anyway, so the survey was carried out through Google Forms and is distributed to the head of schools. And so the viewpoint that we are looking here is mainly from the lecturers, from the head of schools point of view. It's not from the millennials point of view, okay? So some of you may be expecting, what would the millennials say to the school? I can't get that unless I do a more thorough survey, and that will require more time. So given the limited number of responses and with this kind of limitation, so what we'll have for today is kind of like suggestive. It's not going to be an accurate representation for the theological landscape in Asia. But if we are keen to pursue this further, then we will need more thorough research done here in Asia. And I've personally felt that this is something we need to do because we cannot always rely on the Western research that's been done so far, okay? So based on this, a majority of the institution in this survey is mainly from non-denominational, 56.6%. Not really big majority, but slight majority, while others include denominational and interdenominational setting kind of schools. 52.9% have more than half of their student body consists of millennials. 52.9, which is quite encouraging. It means our schools are having millennials in their campus. And then 20.8% stated that more than 100 million students are currently studying with them. So this is kind of encouraging for us. So our schools are not too bad. We have young students in our colleges and seminary. And then 64.2% indicates that there is a growing trend of millennials joining their institutions. And this is what worries us most. If there's no increasing trends of millennials coming to our institutions, we are destined for doom. But at least 64% mentioned that there is this growing trend. And therefore, this data shows us that majority of our institutions are having good numbers of young millennials. However, there are still some small percentages here indicates that there is a downward trend of millennials in their student intake. And also, the data, based on the data, that this trend, whether upward or downward, is not affected by the denominational setting. That means there are some denominational schools are having upward trend as well as downward trend, and so as the other setting. Okay, so it's not affected by denominational environment. So one question I asked the participant is that, what are the challenges that the lecturers face when teaching millennials? Okay. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So the most frequent mentioned observation is this. Go to the next slide. This is the biggest problem that everyone is talking about, is the issue of attention span. That is the most repeated answers. All the response that I receive is this. The millennials are unable to sustain their focus in learning, especially listening to a lecture. So that is the common trait. Everybody is talking about this. Young millennials prefer interactions. They do not like passive learning mode. They want to get involved. That is the number one response I get. Second on the list is the issue of technology and gadgets. Young millennials have good access to these tools and becoming dependent on them. Many of the lecturers responded this. And the third issue is the lacking of biblical knowledge and interest. This has kind of surprised me because many people thought that Christianity has grown much and now seminaries have supposed to be more progressive by this. But somehow the younger students that come to our campus seemingly lacking in biblical knowledge. Even for my own campus, we have young millennials coming to our college, maybe because of the gadgets that they use, they can't tell where is Habakkuk. Right? They don't even know that there's such a book called Habakkuk. I suspect, this is what I suspect, that because it's seldom preached in the pulpit, so their phone, because when you go to your Bible nowadays, you don't have the full table of content. You just go to that particular book. And if you don't preach that book enough, people they forgot about that book. Right? Not like those days. When I was a student, we were forced to memorize the list of books in the Bible according to the arrangement. I think nowadays people don't do that anymore. Just click, click, click. So we don't have that anymore. So lacking of Bible knowledge and lack of interest. There are other issues that I can't present here, including plagiarism, which is another big problem we have. Then these young millennials are unable to think deep. Some people say that. They can't think deep enough. Probably referring to me, I'm a shallow person. And the other thing that is popped up a few times is that many young millennials today, they do not have time to study in full-time program. So they prefer part-time program or non-full-time program, short-term, just intensive and so forth. So these are the three top issues that lecturers face among our young millennials. And then I asked another question about the observable traits. What do they see among the millennials in their college? And again, the result is this. Next slide. They say they are too gadgets dependent. Almost quite a big percentage say that the observable traits in the college, the young guys, they just too stick with their phones, if not their tablets and so forth. And another mention that a few say that young millennials are very creative, but they're easily bored. Right? So, Tim Elmo, who is an expert in dealing with young people, once said this, young people today, their attention span is shorter than a goldfish. I think it's about 8 seconds nowadays, young people. So I think by now, if you are young people, you probably get bored with what I'm saying now. So that is what many of these Asian schools respond. So based on all these traits and all these feedbacks that I received, I realized my hypothesis is not correct. In fact, many of these traits are quite similar, both East and the West. And if that's the case, then a lot of things that whatever discussed in the West may not necessarily be foreign to us in Asian context. Now, what could be the cause of this? And I suspect it's really because technology has become the equalizer in this whole ballgame. Because technology is so accessible and is affecting students, young millennials, globally. So it's not just in the West, it's also in the East. So further on, I try to find out what could be the most effective way to provide spiritual formation among the millennials. So I asked the schools, so since you're the experts and you have so many young millennials in your school, so what do you find to be the most effective tools or vehicle to help spiritual formation? This is what we all trying to find out. And the most repeated answer that outweighs all others is this: mentoring. All the schools that I get feedback from, most of them find that mentoring, in fact, particularly on one-to-one approach mentoring, to be the most effective methods of helping young millennials to grow spiritually. Something for us to take note, right? This is best practice. And lastly, I asked the participants, right, what have you done in your college's seminary to serve the needs of young millennials in your campus? Of course, some of them says nothing at all, right? But most of them give some feedback. So some of the schools have tried to introduce more electronic technologies in their teaching approaches, right? Some of them use PowerPoint, Prezi, and so forth. And then some try to upgrade their facilities. So they started upgrading their broadband to higher speed. They're trying to use better technologies, get better computers, mobile networks, and so forth. And some are trying to tweak their curriculum to be more learner-centered with more practical applications. Right? So they're trying to tweak the program with the students in mind, rather than with accreditation in mind. Okay, I hope I didn't cross any border there. That means what you want, we try to provide for you rather than what ATA wants, right? So,
yes.
And another school has mentioned that they try to increase the meeting time with the students, between the lecturers and the students, so that the students can ask questions, they can provide more feedback. I think for Asia, this is something that is new to us, because most of the time we don't ask feedback, we expect them to say yes. But now they're trying to do that to get involved with the young millennials. So this survey, what can we learn from this? Let's just go to the next slide, please. So if you want the full result of the survey, is there. There are some other things I didn't highlight here because some can be a bit controversial. But with this survey, I think that theological institutions have to engage our young millennials in terms of policy making and curriculum design. And you can see that the Western world and the Eastern world are kind of like clashing now, it's merging in many ways due to technology. And so theological educators, we all have to learn to overcome technophobia. Because there's some response that I get really against technology at all. They say, I think I was just talking with some people, some lecturers force the student to write with pencil and pen and refuse to accept online, not even online, Microsoft Word and all these are out. It's like, okay. So we have to realize that the world has changed so fast. And as educators, we have to be familiar with this fast-paced, technological-driven environment, which is the world of the millennials today. However, as we have seen so far, we also need to be more intentional in equipping the millennials on biblical literacy. We cannot assume that they know it just because they get good access of it, right? They need to train on social skill, soft skills for a more holistic training. Therefore, the mentoring that many of them say is essential, I think that is why it is needed. Young millennials, you cannot assume that they know how to speak with their neighbors anymore. Some of them just stop communicating with their lips, more with their fingers. So we need to teach all these things for holistic development. So when I was preparing this, I came across this lecture by W. Mark Richardson. Some of you may have come across him. And he spoke on the millennials generation and the future of theological education at Pacific Coast Theological Society, November 2012. Based on his seminar, he identified two aspects of theological education that remain constant despite the change in religious culture. Two. Number one, formation. Number two, critical thinking. According to him, to prepare young millennials for future ministry, Richardson advocates that theological education has to be reformed with the context of ministry as the starting point of inquiry. That means they have to start with where the students are. And theological educators ought to reflect on how to prepare students on formation and critical thinking without turning them into academic specialists. Students will then learn how to relate scriptures with the world they will be facing in a responsible and respective approach. Now, I fully agree with Richardson's observations. In BCM, that's what we do. We want to train the students to be effective in their local context. And so, rather than bringing them out of their context, we try to train them where they are. And what we have tried is that over the last 2 years, I'm only a president, this is my 3rd year, okay? So be kind to me. Within 3 years, what can I do? So we try to analyze what's been done over the past few years. And there is a growing trend of young millennials coming to our college. So we have to be very sensitive to the needs of the young millennials who are here with us already, and we want to be more effective to train them so that when they go back to their own context, they'll be more effective. So this is what I'm going to share now. This is our experiment. I use the word experiment because it's not answers. We're still trying things out. Okay? And we discover 3 things. There are many things we discover subsequently, but these are the few things that we discover along the way. The first thing that we discovered is that young students have issue with sleeping. There's an issue of sleep deprivation with our young students. Because of the high amount of screen time and the addictive online entertainment, that affects the rhythm of life. And we all know that the importance of having a rhythm in life. And so to address this issue, what we have tried to do in our college is counterintuitive. Rather than just letting the students be free and do whatever they want, we introduce kind of like monastic, very strict discipline, where students have to follow a schedule on a daily basis. So it's like going back to primary school, where there's a bell and, I think some schools are still doing that, but we have stopped doing that for a while. We expect them, since we are young millennials, right, and millennials do not want to be controlled, so we thought that it's good that let them deal with their own spirituality, let them grow organically and so forth. But then we realized it's not working. So we go the other way, right? We try to swing the pendulum and say, no, okay, let's try this. Everyone must get out of their bed at this time, because we have a residential program, and they're not supposed to be in their room. They have to get out and deal with the world. Start with general revelation. Get some sunlight. And it's working. In fact, we get feedback after that. We ask the student to give feedback before they graduate. What is the thing that you find very helpful? And this is one of the things that they say is helpful. They need people to kick them and say, get up. They are lacking in discipline. And they do not know how to deal with it. So they need disciplined teachers. And this is helpful for formation purpose. Right? The second thing we discovered is that within their own local context, there is a serious lack of mentoring. There's a serious lack of mentorship. Many of our young students do not receive much guidance from their leaders in their own church context. I suppose many of our young students were told to do this and do that and just keep doing things like what I'm going through now. Because you are young, people will just keep saying, you are young, so you do it. Just because you are young. So there's not much guidance given, there's not much time spent in talking about their life and issue. And so with that, what we try to do is that we try to redesign our field education program. Okay? We always have a field education program in our campus. So weekend ministry, every weekend the students will go back to their campus to study, to do work, to serve. We are expecting the church to help and partner with us. But like some of the workshops we have attended recently, the church and the school's partnership is not really that well. So there is this vacuum of leadership back in their own context. So with that, we try to redesign a more intentional field education. I'm not sure about your context, but in our context in Malaysia, our pastors are very busy. And they have no time to fill forms. You know, when you do field education, you need forms, right? Like, what you do, they just don't have time. and they complain to us. But then, so in order to make it work, we put a timeline to it, and it has to be not too long, not too short. So it's just a 5-month thing. So this program is a new thing we just designed, 5 months field education, and it's a contract thing. So the students will have a 5-month durations with one of the mentor assigned in their own church, one of the lecturer assigned from the school, and within the 5 months they'll be coached by these 2 persons. They will have a monthly meeting, at least an hour, meeting with their local leaders, and an hour with the lecturer. There's no books, there's no so-called class hour, no seminars. Basically, one-to-one approach, meet up, talk about what you're doing, and there's a set of goals that they need to achieve. And the students were told you need to gauge where you are now and tell me after 5 months how much you have grown. So we tried with that kind of approach, and the result is this. Almost every student finds this approach very, very helpful, remarkably helpful. Many of them say, my pastor have never talked to me like that. But because of this kind of like short, not too long assignments, they're willing to do it. And some of them mentioned that after they have gone through these 5 months, the pastors and the students' relationship got better. They continue on doing mentoring back in their own context. So I think that may be helpful for some of you to do it in your own context as well. Another thing we try in the campus is this. 2 years ago, we tried to experiment with an online learning management system. So we started using AdBright. Some of you may know AdBright. They're designed by Whittier. Walker, is it Walker? Are you here? Yeah, Walker is there. So if you want to know more about AdBright, please go and find Walker. This is a learning, it comes with a learning management system as well as an administration system, and is super cheap, if I may say that, because a lot of sponsorship have been given to this project. So for us, from the end user point of view, it's cheap and easy for us. So we started using that system in our college. Now, the system is very easy, at least to me. Okay, it's very easy to use, very intuitive. However, the shift of pedagogical approach is very hard because we're so used to lecture, long hours teaching, to do online kind of distant learning. You have to change your approach, and that is not easy. And so the other problem we face in Malaysia is that although we are kind of like moving, progressing, but the technological infrastructure is not very effective yet. Okay, so even Google Hangout may hang. You know Google Hangout, right? So we have not even started using Zoom, but Google Hangout, because it's easy, everybody knows Google, even that will hang from time to time. But nevertheless, simply by introducing an online learning management system, just simply introduce that, have an online interface where a student can log in to check on their assignments, to submit their homework, to watch some of the videos, right? Just simply by doing that, our young students felt at home. I mean, the thing doesn't change much. In fact, the way we introduce it is almost like putting our lectures online, that's it. It's a very simple thing. I think all of us can do it. But because of that, many of the young students, immediately, they felt that this is so good. There's a very positive expression from the young millennials, feeling that the college is progressing, which is a good thing. Because many of them felt that, the seminary college is the old thing, old tradition, but simply introducing an LMS make them feel at home. But then, like I said, it's very intuitive to people like me and my younger generations, but not so for our older lecturer. So that is one thing we are working on to help our older folks learning to use the system. But it's not that difficult. It's doable. Okay. And we also discovered that when we try to do distant learning program, even with the young millennials, human element is still needed. That means you cannot just upload everything online and expect the students to do it. In fact, we find that young millennials have issue with discipline. To do distant learning, you need to be very disciplined as a person. And so the Google Hangout sessions, the personal meetup, getting them to meet up with their local leaders will be very, very important. So when they started doing distant learning, this is what I discovered. I teach distant courses as well. And I find that some of these students used to be very quiet in class, but when they come to a distant mode, because it's face to screen, you're not dealing with the whole class, they tend to be more open. So the interactivity rate is increased when we do that. And the final thing I want to share with you, what we discover for the last 2 years, 3 years, is this. We find that there's a growing number of young students struggling with different kind of addictions. Now, it's not that in the past we don't have. Older, mature students also face with this kind of situation. But particularly the young ones, we find that there are more cases nowadays, especially dealing with pornography, sexual activities, and drugs. It's not affecting just the seminary, it's affecting young millennials across the board, those in the secular college as well as in Bible college. So we started introducing counseling into our training. So before that, we just tried to talk to them, but we realized this kind of addiction issues requires expertise that among our faculty members, we don't have. None of us are trained counselors. And you can't just pray over it and expect everything to be done. We are a Pentecostal school. The past practice is that you cast the demon out of the person and hope that the fella will be free from the addiction. And we realized it's not working. So we started introducing counseling programs and provide them a secure channel. So now students come to us, we give them a form given by our counselors, not by us. And the counselor is a neutral party, and the students can talk to the counselor directly, telling the person what struggles, honest speaking, and this is neutral. And even the school, like for me, I can't get access to the data. Right? This is counseling practice. So, and we find that it is helping some of these students that are struggling with addictions. And then we also find that they like to buy things online. And it's getting worse. So we have to employ a financial expert to teach our young students how to manage their money. So how do you know they are misusing their money? Because we have a residential program, and all this parcel keep coming to our office. My secretary keep complaining to me, when are they going to stop this? I say, we'll never stop. So it has been a trend, so we have to learn how to deal with this, and we need to teach them, because many of the young millennials in my country are going through bankruptcy now. Yeah. They progress very fast in the marketplace, they earn big bucks, but very soon get into debt and so forth. So even seminarians, students in the college, Bible college, we face the same thing. They're not different people. So to close this session, after seeing all these things, you may be feeling a bit sad, but I want to affirm you that all the efforts to build bridges with young generations is important. And as a millennial myself, I benefited from the few theological institutions that shaped me to be who I am today. And I resonate with this TED speaker, Chip Conley. He championed the needs of having different generations learning from one another in an organization. And the key is really to be open, to learn from even the youngest student in your institution, believing that they have something to contribute. Now, I do not have all the answers. In fact, like I said, it's all experiment. But I really hope that this short sharing will inspire you to invest, keep investing in the younger generations in your institutions. And let us join hands together, to do this. We can't do it alone, to equip the young millennials. And that's where the conversation, the table talk session will be very important afterward, where we share our best practice. I think when we come here, some of you may be saying, we hear a lot of things, but they are all over the tops. how can we bring it back to our institution? What are practical things we can do immediately after this? I think sharing of best practice is one way we can learn from one another, right? And so that we can make a greater impact to our young students in the days to come. Thank you, everybody.